I was just installing a security camera. That's all it was supposed to be. The morning started like any other. Instant coffee that tasted like regret, a granola bar that had seen better days, and my phone buzzing with another home security installation request. Jackson Rivera, Tech Support Specialist, at your service. I grabbed my toolkit, loaded up my van with cameras and cables, and headed out to Willowbrook Drive. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. What I didn't expect was to meet someone who would completely redefine what security meant in my life. Tuesday mornings in suburban Denver were predictable in the best possible way. Coffee shops filled with remote workers, joggers dodging sprinklers, and the occasional delivery truck navigating streets that were definitely not designed for modern commerce. I'd been running my small home security business for 3 years now. Nothing fancy, just cameras, alarms, and the occasional smart doorbell for people who wanted to see who was stealing their Amazon packages. The work order was straightforward. Lisa Martinez, 1847 Willowbrook Drive, full exterior security system installation. The house was in one of those neighborhoods where every lawn looked like it had been trimmed with scissors, and the homeowners association probably had opinions about mailbox colors. Big houses, mature trees, the kind of place where people actually used their front porches. My van looked completely out of place among the luxury SUVs and pristine sedans, but that was nothing new. I'd learned to park strategically, close enough to carry equipment, far enough away to avoid looking like I was casing the joint. The morning had started with my usual routine, a quick check of my equipment, a review of the installation plan, and a silent prayer that the customer wouldn't turn out to be one of those people who wanted to micromanage every cable placement. I'd been doing this long enough to spot the red flags. Customers who use phrases like, "I know exactly where everything should go," or, "I've watched YouTube videos about this." When I pulled into the driveway of 1847 Willowbrook Drive, I immediately noticed the house was immaculate, but lived in. The landscaping was professional, but not sterile, with flowering plants that suggested someone who actually enjoyed gardening, rather than just hired it out. Classical music drifted from an open window, something sophisticated, maybe piano. She answered the door before I could even ring the bell, like she'd been watching for my arrival. Lisa Martinez was striking in a way that caught you off guard, early. 50s, shoulder-length auburn hair with just enough silver to look intentional, wearing dark jeans and a fitted blazer that suggested she either worked from home or had just finished a video call. Her smile was immediate and genuine, the kind that made you feel like you were exactly where you were supposed to be. "You must be Jackson," she said, extending her hand with confidence. "The security expert who's going to make me feel safe again." Her handshake was firm, professional, the grip of someone who'd spent years in meetings and negotiations. "That's the plan," I replied, already noting the slight emphasis on "again." "Though I prefer professional paranoia installer." She laughed, a rich, unguarded sound that seemed to surprise even her. "I like that better. Much more honest about what we're really doing here." As she led me around the perimeter of the house, pointing out the areas she was most concerned about, I found myself paying attention to more than just camera angles. She moved with purpose, asked intelligent questions about coverage areas and blind spots, and clearly had done her research about home security systems. This wasn't someone making decisions based on fear. This was strategic planning. "So what's got you thinking about security?" I asked as I measured distances and noted power outlet locations. It was my standard question, but her answer would determine whether this was a routine installation or something more complex. Lisa paused, looking out toward the street where a jogger was making her morning rounds. "Recently divorced," she said, matter-of-factly. "After 25 years of marriage, I'm learning what it feels like to be responsible for my own safety. My ex-husband handled all the security decisions, if you could call leaving doors unlocked and passwords written on sticky notes security." There was no bitterness in her voice, just the practical tone of someone stating facts. "Now I live alone for the first time in decades, and I realized I don't actually know if the house is secure or if I've just been lucky." I nodded, understanding immediately. A lot of people don't think about security until their circumstances change. You're being smart about it. "Smart is a relative term," she said with a slight smile. 6 months ago, I didn't know the difference between a motion detector and a door sensor. Now, I've spent weeks researching camera specifications and monitoring services. As we walked the property, she pointed out specific concerns: the back gate that couldn't be seen from any windows, the side yard that was hidden by mature landscaping, the front porch with multiple blind spots. Her questions were detailed and informed. What was the night vision range? How long did the batteries last in wireless cameras? Could the system send alerts to her phone when she was traveling? This is going to take most of the day, I explained, showing her the installation plan I'd sketched out. 8 cameras, 2 motion sensors, a new smart doorbell with facial recognition and integration with your phone. You'll be able to see everything from anywhere. Perfect, she said. I work from home, so I'll be around if you need anything. Fair warning, I make terrible coffee but excellent tea, and I tend to ask a lot of questions when I'm curious about something. Questions are good, I said, already getting the sense that this installation was going to be different from my usual jobs. Means you'll actually use the system instead of letting it collect dust. She smiled again, and I noticed she had the kind of confidence that comes from someone who's recently discovered they're more capable than they thought. Jackson, I've spent the last 6 months learning how to live independently for the first time since college. I'm not planning to waste any of it. As I started unpacking equipment from my van, I couldn't shake the feeling that this job was going to be more complicated than the work order suggested. Not because of the technical requirements, those were straightforward enough. But there was something about Lisa Martinez that made me think this ordinary Tuesday was about to become significantly less ordinary. The security cameras were supposed to help her feel safe in her new life. What I didn't realize was that by the end of the day, my own sense of security, about work, about relationships, about what I thought I wanted, was going to be completely turned upside down. Some installations change more than just the house's security system. Over the next hour, as I mounted cameras and ran cables, Lisa proved to be the most engaged customer I'd ever worked with. She didn't hover or micromanage. Instead, she asked thoughtful questions that showed she genuinely wanted to understand how everything worked. So the facial recognition on the doorbell, she said, watching me calibrate the angle. How accurate? Is it really? I've read mixed reviews online. Depends on lighting and how you set it up, I explained, adjusting the position slightly. But it's gotten much better in the last 2 years. The key is training it with multiple photos of people you want it to recognize and making sure you have good lighting at the entrance. She nodded, taking notes on her phone. What about false positives? I don't want to get alerts every time a delivery driver comes to the door. I found myself impressed by her questions. Most customers either trusted everything I said without question or assumed I was trying to oversell them. Lisa was clearly someone who did her homework. You can set sensitivity levels, I said, showing her the app interface on my tablet, and create different zones, so the camera can ignore movement on the sidewalk but alert you if someone approaches the door. As I worked, she brought out genuine, iced tea, not from a bottle but clearly homemade with fresh mint. I figured you might get thirsty, she said, handing me a tall glass. It's chamomile mint. I grow the mint myself. You don't have to, I started, but she waved me off. I know I don't have to. I want to. There's a difference. The distinction in her tone made me look at her more carefully. Lisa Martinez wasn't just being polite. She was someone who chose her actions deliberately. Everything about her seemed intentional, from the way she'd researched security systems to the way she spoke about her divorce without bitterness. Can I ask what kind of work you do? I said, taking a break to drink the tea. It was perfect, not too sweet, refreshing without being overwhelming. Marketing consultant, she replied, settling into a patio chair while I worked on the back door. Censor. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I help small businesses figure out their brand identity and digital presence. Started my own firm about 8 months ago, right around the time my marriage ended. Big changes all at once, I observed. She smiled, but there was something both sad and proud in her expression. My ex-husband used to say I wasn't business-minded enough to work for myself. Turns out that was just another thing he was wrong about. The way she said it, not bitter, but matter of fact, told me there was a lot more to that story. How's the business going? Better than I expected, honestly. Turns out 25 years of managing a household, organizing social events, and keeping track of everyone else's needs translates pretty well to project management and client relations. She paused, watching me install a motion sensor. Plus, I don't have anyone telling me I'm not capable anymore. There was steel in her voice that made me understand why she'd chosen to invest in a comprehensive security system. This wasn't just about physical safety. This was about protecting the new life she'd built for herself. "What about you?" she asked. "How long have you been doing security installations?" 3 years with my own business, I said, testing the sensor's range. Before that, I worked for a big tech company doing IT support. Got laid off during budget cuts and figured I'd try working for myself. "Do you miss the corporate world?" I considered the question while adjusting the camera angle. "Some days I miss the steady paycheck and health insurance, but I don't miss sitting in meetings about meetings or having to ask permission to help customers the way they actually need help." Lisa laughed. "Oh, I know those meetings. The ones where you spend an hour discussing whether you need another meeting to make a decision about scheduling a meeting." Exactly. Now if someone needs their system configured differently, I just do it. No committee approval required. We worked in comfortable conversation for another hour. She told me about learning to manage her own finances for the first time, about discovering she actually enjoyed living alone, about the small victories of independence that most people took for granted. I found myself sharing more than I usually did with customers, about the challenges of running a small business, about the satisfaction of solving problems with my hands instead of endless emails. "You know what I realized?" Lisa said as I mounted the final exterior camera. "I spent so many years worrying about what other people thought I should do that I never figured out what I actually wanted to do. And now?" She gestured toward the house, toward the security system that would help her feel safe in her new life. "Now I'm learning. It's terrifying and exciting at the same time." There was something in the way she said it that made me pause in my work. Lisa Martinez wasn't just talking about career changes or divorce recovery. She was talking about discovering who she was when no one else was defining her. "That's brave," I said, meaning it. "Is it? Or is it just long overdue?" She stood up, brushing off her jeans. "Either way, I'm committed to figuring it out." As the afternoon wore on, I found myself taking longer than necessary to explain each component of the system. Lisa absorbed everything with the focus of someone who genuinely wanted to understand, not just use, the technology that would help protect her new independence. By the time I finished the exterior installation, I realized this had become the most enjoyable workday I'd had in months. Not because the job was particularly challenging or lucrative, but because I was working with someone who appreciated both the technical skill and the peace of mind I was providing. "Ready to move inside for the control panel?" I asked, gathering my tools. "Lead the way," Lisa said, holding the door open. "I have a feeling the interesting part is just getting started." She had no idea how right she was. The control panel installation required me to work in Lisa's home office, a beautifully organized space with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a sleek desk setup, and artwork that suggested both sophistication and personal taste. While I mounted the main hub and programmed the system settings, she sat at her desk, occasionally taking calls from clients with the kind of professional confidence that made it clear why her consulting business was thriving. "No, David. Brand consistency means using the same fonts across all platforms," she was saying into her headset, while simultaneously reviewing what looked like a marketing proposal. "I don't care if your nephew thinks Comic Sans is more approachable. Trust me on this one." I tried to focus on configuring the motion sensor zones, but I couldn't help overhearing her side of the conversation. She spoke with authority, patience, and just enough firmness to make it clear she knew what she was talking about. This was clearly someone who had found her element. After she finished the call, she turned to watch me program the final settings. "Sorry about that. Some clients need more guidance than others." "Sounds like you're good at what you do," I said, testing the connectivity between all the sensors. "I'm learning that I am," she replied with a smile that suggested ongoing surprise at her own capabilities. "It's funny how much you can discover about yourself when you're not constantly being told what you're not good at." The system was nearly complete. All that remained was walking through the features with Lisa and making sure she understood how to use everything. As I pulled up the main interface on her tablet, I felt a strange reluctance for the job to end. This had been the most engaging installation I'd done in months. "Okay," I said, handing her the tablet. "This is your command center. You can see all camera feeds, arm and disarm the system, adjust sensitivity settings, and review recorded footage." Lisa took the tablet and studied the interface with the same focused attention she'd brought to everything else. "The cameras are already recording?" "Yep." Motion-activated recording started as soon as I finished the setup. "You can see here." I leaned over to point at the screen, suddenly very aware of how close we were standing. She smelled like something subtle and expensive, maybe vanilla with a hint of sandalwood. "This timeline shows all activity," I continued, trying to stay professional. "And if you tap here, you can see live feeds from any camera." She experimented with the controls, switching between camera views with the quick competence of someone comfortable with technology. "This is incredible. I can literally see everything that's happening around my house from anywhere." "That's the idea. You'll get notifications on your phone for any unusual activity, but you can also check in any time you want." Lisa set the tablet down and turned to face me fully. "Jackson, this is exactly what I needed. I feel like I can finally relax in my own home." "That's what it's all about," I said, starting to pack up my tools. "Security should give you peace of mind, not make you more anxious. Can I ask you something?" she said, and something in her tone made me pause in my packing. "Sure." She studied my face for a moment, like she was weighing whether to say what she was thinking. "I'm 52, more experienced than your ex-girlfriend probably ever was. Want to find out how?" I froze, a cable still half-coiled in my hands. The question hung in the air between us like a challenge, bold and completely unexpected. My brain scrambled to process what she'd just said, cycling through possible interpretations and coming up short. I started, then stopped, realizing I had no idea how to respond. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" Lisa's expression was completely serious, no hint of embarrassment or uncertainty. "That depends on what you think I'm asking." I set down the cable, my mind racing. Was this a proposition? A test? Some kind of elaborate joke? The Lisa I'd spent the day with was confident and direct. But this seemed like a massive leap from professional interaction to whatever this was. "I'm not sure," I admitted honestly. "Could you clarify?" She smiled then, not the polite customer smile I'd seen earlier, but something warmer and more mischievous. "I'm talking about experience with technology, Jackson. Home, automation, smart systems, digital integration. Your ex probably thought a smart TV was the height of technological sophistication." The relief and embarrassment hit me simultaneously. Oh, you meant tech experience." "What did you think I meant?" she asked, clearly amused by my reaction. Well, you're very attractive and confident, and the way you phrased it, I could feel my face getting warm. I thought you might be suggesting something completely different." Lisa burst out laughing, not a polite chuckle, but a genuine, delighted laugh. "Jackson, I may be recently divorced and rediscovering my independence, but I don't proposition my security installers. I have some standards about timing and appropriateness." "I'm an idiot," I muttered, running a hand through my hair. "You're human," she said kindly. "And honestly, it's refreshing that someone finds me attractive enough to think that's what I meant. My ex-husband spent the last few years of our marriage making me feel completely invisible." There was vulnerability in that admission, a glimpse of the hurt that lay beneath her confident exterior. "That's his loss," I said without thinking. "Thank you," she said softly. "But what I actually meant was, I'm planning to upgrade my entire house to a smart home system. Automated lighting, climate control, entertainment integration, the works. And after seeing how you work, how you explain things, I think you'd be perfect for the job." I stared at her, trying to shift gears from embarrassment back to business mode. "You want to hire me for more work?" "I want to hire you to transform this house into the kind of place I dreamed about but never thought I could have. Something that's completely mine, designed exactly the way I want it." She paused. "If you're interested in taking on a project, that's probably 3 times more complex than anything you've done before." Looking at Lisa Martinez, Brilliant, confident, newly independent, and apparently planning to revolutionize her entire living space. I realized this conversation had just changed everything about what I thought this day would be. "When do we start?" I heard myself say. "When do we start?" The words had come out of my mouth before I'd fully processed what I was agreeing to. But looking at Lisa's expression, part surprise, part delight, I realized I meant them completely. "Really?" she asked. "Just like that? You don't want to know the scope, the budget, the timeline?" "I want to know all of those things," I said, settling back into the chair I'd been about to vacate. "But first, I want to understand what you're really trying to create here." Lisa moved to her desk and pulled out a thick folder that looked like it had been organized with military precision. "I've been planning this for months," she said, opening it to reveal printed articles, product specifications, and hand-drawn floor plans. "Ever since the divorce was finalized, I've been thinking about what I actually want my life to look like." She spread several pages across the desk, and I could see this wasn't just about upgrading technology. This was about reimagining how she wanted to live. The notes were detailed, thoughtful, and clearly the result of extensive research. "Smart lighting that adjusts throughout the day to support my circadian rhythms," she explained, pointing to different sections. "Climate zones, so I'm not heating or cooling rooms I'm not using. A whole house audio system, because I've discovered I love having music in every space. Automated window treatments because I work from home and natural light affects my productivity." I studied her plans, impressed by the level of detail. "This isn't just about convenience, is it?" "No," she said, sitting across from me. "It's about creating a space that responds to me, that supports how I actually live and work." For 25 years, I lived in houses that were designed around someone else's preferences, someone else's needs. This is my chance to build something that's completely mine. The vulnerability in that statement hit me unexpectedly. I'd installed plenty of smart home systems, but they were usually about impressing guests or increasing property value. This was about something deeper, about a woman creating a sanctuary that reflected who she was becoming. "Tell me about your ex," I said, then immediately regretted the personal question. "Sorry, that's none of my business." "It's fine," Lisa said, leaning back in her chair. "Richard was controlling, without realizing he was controlling. He made decisions about everything: what colors to paint the walls, what furniture to buy, what temperature to keep the house. He called it being decisive, but it meant I never got to express any preferences." She gestured around the office. "This room? This is the first space I've ever decorated entirely according to my own taste. Every book, every piece of art, every detail, it's all mine. And I want the whole house to feel like this." I looked around the office with new eyes, noticing details I'd missed before. The color palette was sophisticated but warm. The artwork was eclectic but cohesive, and everything felt deliberately chosen rather than randomly assembled. "The smart home technology," I said, understanding dawning. "It's not about the gadgets. It's about having complete control over your environment." "Exactly." Her smile was radiant. "I want lights that dim automatically when I'm reading, music that follows me from room to room, temperature that adjusts based on what I'm doing. I want my house to work with me, not against me." I pulled out my own tablet and started taking notes. "Okay, let's talk about what's actually possible with your budget and timeline. Some of this is straightforward, some of it's cutting edge, and some of it might require custom solutions." For the next hour, we went through her wish list item by item. Lisa had done her research, but she'd also been realistic about priorities. She wanted the lighting and climate control first, then audio and window treatments, with some of the more advanced features planned for future phases. The whole project would probably take 3 to 4 months, I explained, sketching out a rough timeline. "We'd need to do it in stages so you're not living in a construction zone the entire time." "That works perfectly," she said. "I'm not going anywhere, and I'd rather do it right than do it fast." As we talked through technical specifications and installation logistics, I found myself genuinely excited about the project. This wasn't just another job. This was a chance to create something genuinely innovative, to help someone build the exact life they wanted. "Can I ask you something?" Lisa said as we wrapped up the planning session. "Sure. Why did you say yes so quickly?" This is a big project, probably more complex than anything in your normal wheelhouse. Most contractors would want to think it over, get second opinions, maybe bring in partners. I considered the question, surprised by my own immediate enthusiasm. Honestly, because you're not asking me to install someone else's idea of what a smart home should be. You're asking me to help you build something that's completely yours. That's the kind of project I got into this business hoping to find. Lisa smiled, and there was something both grateful and determined in her expression. Jackson, I think this is going to be the beginning of a very interesting partnership. Partnership? I asked. You're not just installing equipment, she said. You're helping me create the foundation for the next phase of my life. That makes you more than a contractor. It makes you a collaborator. As I packed up my tools for the second time that day, I realized Lisa was right. This wasn't going to be a typical client relationship. This was going to be something entirely different. Something that would challenge both of us in ways we probably couldn't imagine yet. I'll have a detailed proposal and timeline to you by Friday, I said, shouldering my equipment bag. I'll be ready, she replied, walking me to the door. Jackson, thank you for understanding what I'm really trying to do here. Thank you for trusting me with it, I said. As I loaded my van and drove away from Willowbrook Drive, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything about my business, and maybe my life, was about to change in ways I wasn't prepared for. Some installations are just technical projects. Others become the foundation for something much more significant. By Friday, I had the most comprehensive proposal I'd ever written ready for Lisa. What should have been a straightforward equipment list and timeline had evolved into something closer to an architectural plan, complete with phase breakdowns, integration schedules, and detailed explanations of how each system would work together. When I arrived at her house to present the proposal, I found her in the front yard having what appeared to be a tense conversation with an older woman I didn't recognize. The woman was holding a clipboard and speaking in the kind of loud, authoritative voice that suggested she was used to being listened to. Lisa, the woman was saying as I approached, I'm just concerned about all the contractor activity in the neighborhood, property values, you understand. Lisa spotted me walking up the driveway, and her expression shifted to one of relief. Amber, this is Jackson Rivera, the security specialist I mentioned. Jackson, meet Amber Thornton, president of our homeowners association. Amber Thornton was probably in her mid-60s, with perfectly styled silver hair and the kind of crisp, business attire that suggested she approached neighborhood management like a corporate boardroom. She looked me up and down with undisguised skepticism. Security specialist? She repeated, like the words tasted questionable. And now I understand there's going to be ongoing improvements? Smart home integration, Lisa said smoothly. The work will be done during appropriate hours, and everything will be up to code with proper permits. It's not about permits, Amber said, consulting her clipboard. It's about maintaining the character of the neighborhood. Some residents have expressed concerns about the frequency of service vehicles at your property. I could see Lisa's jaw tighten slightly. Service vehicles? Delivery trucks? Contractors? And now this, Amber gestured vaguely in my direction. People notice patterns, Lisa, especially when there are questions about lifestyle changes. The implication was clear, and I felt my own irritation rising. Before I could say anything, Lisa stepped forward. Amber, I appreciate your concern for property values, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But I'm upgrading my home's technology systems, not operating a business. If any neighbors have specific complaints, they're welcome to discuss them with me directly. Amber clearly wanted to say more, but Lisa's professional tone left no room for argument. Well, she said finally, just be mindful of the community standards. After Amber left, Lisa stood in her driveway for a moment, watching the HOA president walk back to her own immaculate house 3 doors down. Everything okay? I asked. Just small-town politics, Lisa said, but I could see the interaction had bothered her more than she was letting on. Some people have very strong opinions about how recently divorced women should behave. We went inside to review the proposal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Amber Thornton was going to be a complication we hadn't anticipated. This is incredible, Lisa said as we spread the plans across her dining room table. You've thought of everything. The proposal outlined a 6-month timeline broken into 3 phases. First the lighting and climate control, then audio and security integration. Finally, the advanced automation features. Each phase was designed to be minimally disruptive while building toward a cohesive system. The beauty of doing it this way, I explained, is that each phase improves your daily life immediately, but everything works together seamlessly by the end. As we talked through the technical details, Lisa's phone rang. "Sorry, it's my brother," she said, glancing at the caller ID. "Do you mind if I take this quickly?" "Of course." "Hey Greg," she answered, putting the call on speaker while continuing to review the plans. "What's up?" "Just checking on my favorite sister," came a warm male voice from the phone. "How's the Fortress of Solitude coming along?" Lisa laughed. "It's a smart home, not a fortress, and I'm your only sister." Details. "So is this the security guy you mentioned? The one who's going to make your house smarter than you are?" "Jackson's here now, actually. We're reviewing the smart home proposal." "Jackson, Lisa's told me all about you. She's very impressed with your work." I felt heat creep up my neck. Just trying to give her what she needs. That's exactly what she needs. Someone who listens to what she actually wants instead of telling her what she should want. There was clearly some history behind that comment, and Lisa shot a warning look at the phone. "Greg?" "What?" "I'm just saying, it's nice that someone's treating you like the intelligent, capable person you are." After the call ended, Lisa looked slightly embarrassed. "Sorry about that. Greg's been very supportive through the divorce, maybe overly so. He seems protective." "He is. He never liked Richard much, and he's been encouraging me to spread my wings, I guess you could say." Over the next week, as I began the first phase of installation, I started to understand the dynamics of Lisa's new life. Greg called regularly to check on progress and offer encouragement. Amber Thornton made several pointed appearances whenever I was working outside, always with some reason to be walking past with her clipboard. And then there were the neighbors, who were clearly curious but too polite to ask directly. I'd catch them watching from windows or finding excuses to check their mail when I was carrying equipment to the house. "They're probably wondering if you're my boyfriend," Lisa said one afternoon, catching me notice someone peeking through blinds across the street. "Are they going to be disappointed when they find out I'm just your contractor?" "I don't know," she said with a smile that seemed to suggest she'd been thinking about that question herself. "Are you?" The comment hung between us as I worked on programming the new lighting controls, and I realized that somewhere in the past week, the line between professional and personal had become increasingly blurred. Working with Lisa felt different from any other job I'd done. She was genuinely interested in understanding how everything worked. She brought me coffee that was actually good, and our conversations had started ranging far beyond technical specifications into topics that had nothing to do with smart home systems. I was starting to look forward to these daily visits in a way that had nothing to do with the paycheck. 3 weeks into the smart home project, Lisa and I had developed a comfortable routine. I'd arrive each morning around 8:30. She'd have real coffee waiting, not the instant stuff I usually drank, and we'd spend a few minutes going over the day's plan before I started work. What surprised me was how much I looked forward to those morning conversations. "The lighting automation is already changing how I work," Lisa told me one Tuesday morning as I calibrated the sensors in her office. "Yesterday I was so focused on a client presentation that I didn't even notice it had gotten dark outside. The lights just gradually adjusted to keep the illumination perfect." "That's exactly what it's supposed to do," I said, pleased that the system was working as intended. "Your circadian rhythms shouldn't have to fight against your environment." "It's more than that, though," she said, settling into her desk chair with her coffee. "It feels like the house is actually supporting what I'm trying to accomplish instead of just being a place where I happen to work." Over the past few weeks, I'd watched Lisa's confidence grow along with her house's intelligence. She'd started taking on bigger clients, had been featured in a local business magazine, and seemed to be thriving in ways that went beyond just the technology upgrades. "Speaking of supporting what you're trying to accomplish," she said, "Greg wants to take us both to dinner this weekend. He's convinced you're some kind of tech wizard and wants to pick your brain about automating his own place." The casual way she said "us both" made my stomach do something unexpected. "That sounds great. I'd be happy to talk shop with your brother." "Good, because he's not taking no for an answer. Fair warning, Greg asks a lot of personal questions when he's deciding whether he likes someone. Before I could ask what kind of personal questions, Lisa's phone buzzed with a notification from the security system. She glanced at the screen and frowned. That's weird. Motion detected at the back gate, but there's no one there. I pulled up the camera feed on my tablet. The back gate area was empty, but the timestamp showed motion had been detected 3 minutes earlier. Could be a large bird or a neighborhood cat. The sensitivity might need adjusting, but when I checked the recorded footage, what I saw made me pause. A figure in dark clothing had approached the gate, spent several seconds examining the new camera installation, then left quickly when the motion light activated. Lisa, come look at this. She studied the footage over my shoulder, close enough that I caught that subtle vanilla scent again. That doesn't look like someone just passing by. The figure was too distant and shadowed to identify, but their behavior was definitely suspicious. They'd approached deliberately, examined the security equipment, and retreated when it activated. Has anything like this happened before? I asked. Not that I noticed, but I wouldn't have noticed before you installed the cameras. She rewound the footage. You think someone's been checking out the house? Maybe. Or maybe they're curious about all the new technology going in. Either way, it's worth keeping an eye on. I made a note to adjust the camera angle to get better coverage of the gate area, but the incident left both of us feeling slightly unsettled. Later that afternoon, while I was installing smart switches in the kitchen, Lisa's doorbell rang. Through the new video doorbell, we could see it was Amber Thornton, looking even more official than usual with her clipboard and what appeared to be a folder full of documents. Mrs. Martinez, Amber said, when Lisa answered. I need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to my attention. What kind of concerns? Lisa asked, keeping her tone neutral. Well, there have been reports of unusual activity around your property. Lights turning on and off at odd hours, unfamiliar vehicles, and frankly, some neighbors are worried about what kind of business operations might be taking place. I could see Lisa's jaw tighten from where I stood in the kitchen. Business operations? The constant contractor presence, the security cameras, now these strange lighting patterns. Some residents are concerned about property values and neighborhood character. Amber, Lisa said with forced patience. I'm upgrading my home's technology. The lights are automated, which means they operate on schedules. The contractor is installing legal improvements with proper permits. And the security cameras are protecting my property, not surveilling anyone else's. Be that as it may, Amber continued. I need to inform you that the HOA board will be reviewing your situation at next week's meeting, just to ensure everything remains within community guidelines. After Amber left, Lisa stood in her entryway for a long moment, clearly frustrated. You okay? I asked. I knew this would happen eventually, she said. A divorced woman living alone, making changes, not asking permission from the neighborhood committee. It threatens their sense of order. Is there anything they can actually do? Probably not legally, but they can make my life difficult. And apparently they think having you here regularly is somehow inappropriate. She looked at me with concern. Jackson, I don't want this project to cause problems for your business. Let me worry about my business, I said. The question is whether you want to continue with the upgrades, knowing it might mean dealing with more of this. Lisa's expression shifted from concern to determination. I've spent too many years letting other people's opinions dictate my choices. I'm not about to start again now. But as I packed up my tools that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that the HOA's scrutiny was just the beginning of our problems. The dinner with Greg that weekend turned out to be exactly what I needed after the tension with the HOA. Lisa's brother was a software engineer with an easy laugh and the kind of protective instincts that made it clear he genuinely cared about his sister's happiness. So you're the guy who's helping Lisa build her fortress of technology, Greg said over appetizers at a downtown Denver restaurant. More like helping her create a responsive living environment, I corrected, earning an approving nod from Lisa. See? Greg said to his sister. He gets it. Richard would have called it an expensive waste of money on unnecessary gadgets. Greg, Lisa warned, but without much heat. What? I'm just saying it's nice to see someone support your ideas instead of dismissing them. Greg turned back to me. You should have seen her during the divorce proceedings. Richard's lawyer kept arguing that she wasn't capable of managing property or making financial decisions. Meanwhile, She was running circles around both of them with research and documentation. I looked at Lisa with new respect. You handled your own divorce proceedings? With legal counsel, she clarified. But yes, I did most of the preparation myself. Turns out, 25 years of managing a household translates pretty well to organizing legal documents and financial records. The pride in her voice was unmistakable, and I found myself admiring not just her competence, but her determination to prove herself capable. The evening was going well, until Greg's phone buzzed with a notification that made him frown. Lisa, are you getting alerts from your security system? She checked her own phone and her expression darkened. Motion detected at the front door, but there's no one there. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone. The front porch was empty, but when I checked the recorded footage from 5 minutes earlier, we could see someone had left an envelope taped to the door. We should head back, Lisa said, her earlier relaxed mood evaporating. When we arrived at her house, the envelope was still there, unmarked, sealed, and somehow ominous despite its ordinary appearance. Lisa tore it open while Greg and I flanked her on either side. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. Some people need to remember their place in the community. Excessive attention from service personnel reflects poorly on neighborhood standards. Consider moderating your behavior accordingly. What the hell is this? Greg demanded, taking the letter to examine it more closely. It's unsigned, typed, printed on generic paper, I observed. Someone's trying to intimidate you without taking responsibility for it. Lisa's reaction surprised me. Instead of fear or upset, she looked furious. 25 years, she said quietly. 25 years of Richard telling me to be quieter, less opinionated, more considerate of what other people thought. And now I'm supposed to accept anonymous threats about how I live in my own house? Lisa, Greg started, clearly concerned. No, she said, her voice getting stronger. I'm done letting other people's discomfort dictate my choices. If someone has a problem with my contractor being here, they can say it to my face with their name attached. The steel in her voice reminded me why her consulting business was thriving. This was someone who had learned to fight for what she wanted. What do you want to do? I asked. First, we're increasing the security coverage, she said decisively. I want cameras that can identify anyone who approaches this property. Second, we're documenting everything. And third, we're accelerating the timeline on the smart home project. Accelerating it? If someone thinks they can intimidate me into hiding, they're about to learn how wrong they are. I want this house to be everything I planned, and I want it finished as quickly as possible. Greg looked between us with growing concern. Lisa, maybe you should consider what? Backing down? Making myself smaller? Greg, I appreciate your concern, but I've already spent too many years living that way. Over the next few days, Lisa's determination proved unwavering. She approved expedited delivery on all remaining equipment, hired additional contractors for tasks that could be done simultaneously, and began documenting every interaction with neighbors or HOA representatives. The anonymous harassment escalated too. We found garbage scattered across her front lawn one morning, clearly placed rather than blown by wind. Someone left flyers about maintaining community standards on every car in the neighborhood except hers. And the motion sensors were triggered multiple times each night by someone walking the property perimeter just outside camera range. Whoever's doing this knows exactly where the blind spots are, I told Lisa, as we reviewed the latest footage. Or they're learning by trial and error, she replied, making notes on her tablet. Either way, we're going to catch them. You're not scared? Lisa looked up from her documentation with the kind of expression that made it clear why her business clients trusted her judgment. Jackson, I've survived a 25-year marriage to someone who thought my opinions didn't matter, a divorce where opposing counsel tried to paint me as incompetent, and starting my own business while half the people I knew predicted I'd fail within 6 months. Some anonymous coward leaving me nasty notes isn't going to make me hide. As I watched her methodically plan our response to the harassment, I realized I was seeing something remarkable. Someone who had learned not just to stand up for herself, but to thrive under pressure. The question was whether I was prepared to stand with her when things got worse. By Thursday morning, Lisa had transformed her home office into what Greg jokingly called mission control. She'd created a detailed timeline of all harassment incidents, mapped the blind spots in our security coverage, and even started a spreadsheet tracking which neighbors were home during each occurrence. "Okay," she said, spreading printed security, screenshots across her desk like a detective planning a case. "Look at the patterns. Tuesday night, motion detected at 11:47 p.m. south side of the property. Wednesday, 12:23 a.m., back gate area. Last night, 11:55 p.m., front yard perimeter." I studied the timeline she'd created. "They're getting bolder, moving closer to the house each time. Or more frustrated that they're not scaring me off," Lisa replied. "Either way, we need better coverage." Greg arrived with coffee and what he called reinforcements, his girlfriend Katie, who turned out to be a cybersecurity specialist with opinions about residential surveillance systems. "You've got good equipment," Katie said, reviewing our camera setup. "But your coverage strategy is too focused on perimeter monitoring. If someone's specifically trying to avoid detection, you need overlapping fields that eliminate blind spots entirely." "Can we do that without violating any privacy laws?" Lisa asked. "Absolutely, as long as all cameras are focused on your property. But we should also consider some less obvious monitoring." Katie pulled out her laptop and showed us several options I hadn't considered. Motion sensors disguised as garden lights, audio recording capabilities for the existing cameras, even smart doorbell integration that could identify familiar faces versus strangers. "The goal," Katie explained, "isn't just to catch whoever's doing this. It's to create a security net so comprehensive that they can't approach your property without being detected and recorded." "How long would that take to install?" I asked. "With all of us working together? 2 days, maybe 3. Lisa looked around at the three of us, her brother, his girlfriend, and her contractor, who had somehow become an impromptu security team. "You know what? Let's do it. I'm tired of being reactive." The next 2 days turned into the most intensive installation project I'd ever undertaken. Katie handled the technical coordination, routing network cables and configuring advanced settings. Greg managed the physical installation of sensors and cameras in hard-to-reach places. Lisa coordinated the whole operation, while simultaneously running her consulting business from her laptop. And I found myself not just installing equipment, but helping to orchestrate what amounted to a counter-surveillance operation in suburban Denver. "Motion sensor behind the garden shed," Katie called out Friday afternoon. "We'll catch anyone trying to approach from the back alley." "Audio pickup on the front porch camera is working perfectly," Greg reported. "We'll hear any conversations, even if the video doesn't catch faces." "Smart doorbell is learning faces," Lisa added, testing the facial recognition feature. "It already knows Jackson, Greg, and me. Anyone else will trigger an immediate alert." By Friday evening, Lisa's property was more comprehensively monitored than most small businesses. But more than that, the collaborative effort had created something none of us had expected. A team that worked together seamlessly. "Pizza and strategy session?" Lisa suggested as we finished the final tests. "I'll order," Katie said. "Greg, wine or beer?" "Both," he replied. "I have a feeling we're going to need them." As we gathered around Lisa's dining room table with takeout, containers and laptops, reviewing the completed security network, I realized this had become about much more than catching a neighborhood harasser. "You know what I like about this setup?" Lisa said, pulling up the master control interface on her tablet. "It's not just defensive. We're not hiding or hoping the problem goes away. We're taking control." "Plus," Katie added, "whoever's been skulking around is about to discover that amateur hour is over. This system will capture everything: video, audio, movement patterns, timing. If they come back, we'll have enough evidence to press charges." "Do you think they will?" Greg asked. "Come back, I mean?" "People who leave anonymous, threatening notes aren't usually the type to give up easily," I said. "They escalate until they get the reaction they want or until they face real consequences." Lisa nodded grimly. "Then let's make sure they face consequences." That night, as Greg and Katie headed home and I packed up my tools, Lisa walked me out to my van. The new security lights illuminated the entire front yard, and I could see camera indicators blinking discreetly from multiple positions. "Jackson," she said, "I know this has gone way beyond what you signed up for when I hired you for a smart home installation." "Yeah, it has," I agreed. "But I'm glad to be part of it. Even though it's probably going to get more complicated before it gets better," I looked at her standing there in the glow of the security lights she'd helped design, surrounded by technology we'd installed together, facing down threats with the kind of courage most people only wished they had. Especially because of that, I said. Saturday night at 11:43 p.m., our security net finally paid off. I was at home reviewing equipment invoices when my phone buzzed with multiple alerts from Lisa's system. Motion detected, audio recording triggered, facial recognition activated. I pulled up the live feeds and immediately called Lisa. "Are you seeing this?" I asked when she answered. "Oh, I'm seeing it," she replied, her voice tight with satisfaction, and recording every second of it. On the front yard camera, we could clearly see a figure in dark clothing placing something on Lisa's porch. But this time, when the motion lights activated, instead of fleeing, the person looked directly up at the camera. The facial recognition system immediately identified them. Edward Brennan, Amber Thornton's adult son, who apparently still lived, in his mother's basement and had strong opinions about neighborhood propriety. "Call Greg and Katie," Lisa said. "Tell them to get over here. And Jackson, bring your laptop. We're going to need to document everything before we call the police." 20 minutes later, the four of us were gathered in Lisa's living room, watching high-definition footage of Edward Brennan systematically harassing his mother's neighbor. The audio pickup had captured him muttering complaints about uppity, divorced women, and disrupting the neighborhood order. "This is better evidence than most police investigations ever get," Katie said, copying files to multiple storage locations. "Video, audio, facial identification, timestamps, documented pattern of behavior." "Question is," Greg said, "do we go straight to the police or give them a chance to stop voluntarily?" Lisa was quiet for a moment, studying the footage of Edward examining her security cameras with obvious frustration. "You know what? I think we pay them a visit first, face to face on the record with all the evidence." "Lisa," I started, concerned about direct confrontation. "No, hear me out," she said. "Amber Thornton has been using her position as HOA president to intimidate me, probably at her son's urging. Edward's been skulking around my property like a burglar. They think they can hide behind anonymity and authority. I want them to understand exactly what they're dealing with." The next morning, our unlikely team marched up to the Thornton house with laptops, printed evidence, and a level of organized determination that would have impressed any corporate legal department. Lisa rang the doorbell while the rest of us flanked her like a very polite security detail. Amber answered the door in her usual crisp attire, but her expression shifted from annoyed to concerned when she saw all four of us. "Mrs. Thornton," Lisa said pleasantly, "we need to discuss your son's nighttime activities." "I'm sorry. What are you—" "Edward," Lisa continued, producing a crystal-clear printed photo of him on her front porch. "Trespassing, harassment, intimidation. We have comprehensive video and audio evidence of everything he's been doing." Amber's face went pale. "That's impossible. Edward wouldn't—" "Would you like to see the footage?" Katie asked helpfully, opening her laptop. "We have facial recognition confirmation, timestamps, and audio recording of his comments about uppity divorced women." The sound of Edward's own voice played back through the laptop speakers seemed to drain all fight out of Amber. She called for her son, who appeared in the doorway looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Is this you?" Lisa asked, showing him the photo. Edward's mumbled, "maybe," was barely audible. "And did you leave anonymous? Threatening notes, scatter garbage on my property, and spend weeks skulking around my house at night?" "I was just— the neighborhood has standards," he said weakly. "Here's what's going to happen," Lisa said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent months learning to negotiate from a position of strength. "The harassment stops immediately. All of it. You're going to stay away from my property completely. And Mrs. Thornton, the HOA's sudden interest in my lifestyle choices is going to disappear." "And if it doesn't?" Amber asked. Katie closed her laptop with a decisive snap. "Then we take all of this evidence to the police and file formal charges for stalking, harassment, and trespassing. Plus, we send copies to every member of the HOA board, along with a detailed timeline of how the association president used her position to enable her son's criminal behavior." The threat was delivered so matter-of-factly that it took a moment for the full implications to sink in. "That would ruin," Amber started, "your reputation, your son's future, Your position in the neighborhood? Lisa nodded. Yes, it would. Which is why this ends now. Edward mumbled something that might have been an apology, and Amber promised the HOA would focus on other matters going forward. As we walked back to Lisa's house, Greg shook his head in amazement. That was the most civilized dismantling of a harassment campaign I've ever witnessed. Corporate negotiation skills, Lisa said with satisfaction. Turns out they're very transferable to suburban intimidation tactics. Plus, overwhelming evidence. And a unified response, Katie added. Hard to maintain the moral high ground when you're caught on camera acting like a stalker. That afternoon, as the others headed home and I finished documenting the incident for insurance purposes, Lisa sat on her porch looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in weeks. You know what the best part is? She said. That it's over? That I didn't back down. 6 months ago, I would have probably moved rather than deal with this kind of confrontation. Now? She gestured toward the house where we'd just delivered, an ultimatum to her harassers. Now I know I can handle whatever comes next. With the harassment situation resolved, we were finally able to focus on completing the smart home project without distractions. Over the next week, as I installed the final automation features, I noticed a change in Lisa that went beyond just relief. She seemed more settled, more confident in her own space. The house feels different now, she said one evening as we tested the whole house audio system. Music flowed seamlessly from room to room as she moved through her daily routine. Not just the technology, but everything. It feels like it's actually mine. It always was yours, I pointed out, adjusting the volume balance between zones. Legally, yes, but emotionally? She paused in the kitchen doorway, considering. I don't think I've ever lived anywhere that felt completely mine until now. That evening, instead of our usual technical review, Lisa invited me to stay for dinner. The first meal she'd cooked in her newly automated kitchen. The smart lighting shifted perfectly as daylight faded. The climate control maintained ideal temperature without any manual adjustment, and the audio system provided subtle background ambiance that enhanced conversation rather than overwhelming. This is exactly what I imagined, she said, serving pasta that smelled incredible. A space that supports how I actually live instead of fighting against it. The system's working perfectly, I agreed. But Lisa shook her head. I'm not talking about the system, Jackson. I'm talking about my life. As we ate, she began sharing stories I hadn't heard before. About the years she'd spent managing Richard's career, while her own ambitions got smaller and smaller. About how she'd gradually stopped expressing opinions because disagreement was always treated as disloyalty. About the slow erosion of confidence that happens when someone consistently dismisses your thoughts and preferences. The worst part, she said, refilling our wine glasses, wasn't the big conflicts. It was the 1,000 small moments where I learned to second-guess myself, where I stopped trusting my own judgment about everything from paint colors to business ideas. How did you find your way back? Lisa was quiet for a moment, looking around the kitchen that perfectly reflected her taste and needs. Honestly, it started with this house, with making decisions about what I wanted without having to justify them to anyone else. And then hiring you gave me practice in articulating my vision and seeing it taken seriously. You hired me because you needed tech support. I hired you because you listened to what I actually wanted, instead of telling me what I should want, she corrected. Do you know how rare that is? Most contractors I talked to wanted to sell me their standard package. You wanted to understand my specific needs. The vulnerability in her admission surprised me. Lisa, you've built an incredible business, handled a complex divorce, stood up to harassment. You're one of the strongest people I know. I'm learning to be, she said softly. But Jackson, 6 months ago, I wouldn't have had the confidence to manage any of this. Not the business, not the harassment, certainly not a major home renovation project. What changed? She looked around the room, at the lights that adjusted automatically to support her mood, the music system that followed her preferences, the climate control that maintained her ideal comfort level, and then back at me. I learned what it feels like to have someone treat my ideas as valuable, she said, to work with someone who sees my vision as worth creating, instead of just indulging. The weight of that statement settled between us. I realized that somewhere over the past few months, This had stopped being just a client relationship. Lisa wasn't just someone who'd hired me for a technical project. She was someone who'd trusted me with her dreams about how she wanted to live. You know what the real revelation has been? She continued. I spent 25 years thinking I was asking too much, wanting too much, expecting too much. Turns out, I was just asking the wrong person. The smart home project was officially complete by the following Friday. Every system was integrated. Every automation was programmed to Lisa's preferences, and the house responded to her needs with the kind of seamless intelligence we'd planned from the beginning. As I packed up my tools for what should have been the final time, I felt an unexpected reluctance to leave. Jackson, Lisa said, as I loaded the last of my equipment into the van. Can I ask you something? Of course. She led me back into the house, to the living room where the late afternoon light was automatically adjusting to create the perfect ambiance for serious conversation. What you've built here. It's not just about the technology, is it? You've created something that goes beyond standard smart home installation. I looked around the space that had become so familiar over the past few months. We created it together. I just handled the technical implementation. That's exactly what I mean, she said, settling onto the sofa. You saw this as a collaboration, not just a service contract. And I've been thinking, what if we didn't stop here? Stop where? Lisa pulled out her tablet, but instead of showing me technical specifications, she opened what looked like a business plan. I've been getting inquiries from other people who want what I have. Not just smart home technology, but the whole experience. Someone who listens to their vision and creates something completely customized. I sat down across from her, intrigued. What kind of inquiries? Professional women, mostly. People who've been through major life transitions and want their living space to reflect who they're becoming, not who they used to be. She turned the tablet so I could see her notes. There's a market for this, Jackson. For smart home design that's about supporting people's lives, not just showing off technology. The business plan was comprehensive. Target demographics, service offerings, pricing structures, even preliminary marketing strategies. This wasn't a casual idea. This was something she'd researched thoroughly. You want to start a business together? I want to offer what we created here to other people who need it. My consulting skills for understanding client needs and project management. Your technical expertise and installation capabilities. A partnership that creates spaces as thoughtfully designed as this one. I studied her proposal, impressed by the level of detail. This would be a completely different kind of business than what I'm doing now. It would be a completely different kind of business than what either of us is doing now, she corrected. But Jackson, look what we accomplished here. We didn't just install technology, we transformed how someone lives in their own space. The idea was compelling, but it would mean changing everything about how I worked. What would this look like practically? Full-service smart living consultation. We'd meet with clients, understand their lifestyle needs, design integrated solutions, handle all installation and programming, then provide ongoing support. Premium service for people who want their homes to actively support their goals instead of just housing their stuff. And you think there's a market for that? Lisa smiled, pulling up another screen on her tablet. I've already got a waiting list. 3 referrals from my business network, 2 neighbors who've seen what we did here, and inquiries from the article about my consulting firm that mentioned my innovative approach to work-life integration. Looking at her sitting there with a fully developed business plan, a list of potential clients, and the confidence of someone who'd learned to trust her own judgment, I realized this wasn't just an opportunity, it was a chance to build something. A meaningful with someone who'd become much more important to me than just a client. What would you call this business? I asked. I was thinking intelligent living solutions, she said, but I'm open to suggestions. I looked around the room that perfectly supported Lisa's work and life, then back at her expectant expression. When do we start? 6 months later, Intelligent Living Solutions had transformed from Lisa's ambitious idea into a thriving business that neither of us could have imagined when we first met. Our client waiting list had grown to 2 months out. We'd been featured in Denver Home and Design magazine, and we were already planning to hire additional technicians to keep up with demand. The Morrison project is going live today, Lisa announced, reviewing our schedule over morning coffee in what had become our shared office space in her converted garage. Smart lighting, climate control, security integration, and that custom entertainment system David specifically requested. Everything tested perfectly yesterday, I confirmed, checking the final installation checklist. They're going to love how the music follows them from room to room. Our partnership had evolved into something seamless. Lisa handled client consultation and project design. I managed technical implementation and system integration. And together we created living spaces that genuinely improved how people experience their daily lives. More importantly, we discovered that our working relationship had benefits that extended far beyond business. You know, Lisa said, settling into her desk chair. When I asked if you wanted to find out how experienced I was, I had no idea it would lead to this. To a successful business partnership? To all of it, she said, gesturing around the office that had become the headquarters for our joint venture. The business, the confidence, learning what it feels like to build something with someone who sees your capabilities instead of your limitations. Greg knocked on the office door, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing a grin that suggested good news. Are you two ready for your first major media interview? What interview? I asked. Colorado Business Weekly wants to feature you in their Innovative Partnerships section, he announced. Apparently, the story of a divorced marketing consultant and a tech specialist creating a new category of smart home services is exactly the kind of entrepreneurial success they love to highlight. Lisa looked at me with excitement. Jackson, we're going to be in a magazine. More importantly, Katie added, appearing behind Greg with her laptop, your website inquiries have doubled since that last client posted about their experience on social media. You're going to need to expand faster than you planned. As we discussed growth strategies and media opportunities, I found myself reflecting on how dramatically my life had changed since that first security camera installation. What started as a routine service call had become a business partnership, a friendship, and something that felt suspiciously like the foundation for a much larger shared future. Can I ask you something? Lisa said, as Greg and Katie headed out, to celebrate our latest success. Always. When you said yes to starting this business together, what were you really saying yes to? I looked around the office we'd created together, at the project plans covering the walls, at the evidence of everything we'd built through collaboration and mutual respect. I was saying yes to the idea that the best things happen when you find someone who sees the same possibilities you do, I said, and who's brave enough to build them with you. Lisa smiled, the kind of smile that suggested she'd been hoping for exactly that answer. Good, because I have some ideas about what we should build next, such as? Well, she said, pulling up what looked like architectural drawings on her tablet. I've been thinking about expanding beyond smart homes. What if we designed entire smart communities? Integrated living environments where technology supports not just individual households, but neighborhood interaction and sustainability. Looking at Lisa Martinez, successful entrepreneur, fearless innovator, and the person who taught me what true partnership could accomplish, I realized that our story was just beginning. Show me the plans, I said. Some experiences really are worth finding out about, especially the ones that change everything you thought you knew about what you wanted from life. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.